With their impending return seemingly on the horizon, the Elite reportedly have begun filming a new project for AEW. We've got the very latest details on that. Speaking of the Elite, their arch nemesis CM Punk has made his first public appearance since the infamous All Out Brawl on commentary from an MMA promotion. We've also got the latest details on why Bandido decided to choose AEW over signing for WWE. We've got the ratings for this week's edition of Dynamite on TBS. Saraya, we've got some details on her return from injury and being cleared by her doctors. MJF, what's the plans for him prior to Full Gear? And a match has been postponed for tonight's edition of Rampage. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrest News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. So let's get straight into the biggest stories in AEW right now. Let's start off talking about the Elite. As I mentioned, their return to AEW is seemingly getting closer and closer. It's on the horizon. Full Gear, seemingly, we're going to see the Elite once again back inside of an AEW ring for the first time since All Out, when they won the AEW World Trios Tag Team Championships. Of course, they were then stripped of the championships following that brawl they had with CM Punk and Ace Steel backstage at the Now Arena in Chicago. But earlier this year, a reality series focusing on the inner workings of AEW was given the green light, and it appears filming for it just recently started, beginning with the November 2nd edition of Dynamite in Baltimore. And according to the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, it is believed that the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega will be involved in the show. Not only are the famed trio of the Elite top stars on the AEW roster, but they have served as executive vice presidents of the company. Therefore, it makes sense for them to be part of the show. The three of them haven't been on AEW television since the backstage altercation after All Out between them and CM Punk. That still remains unresolved, kind of. The investigation certainly is complete. In recent weeks, however, they have re-emerged backstage at AEW Dynamite. They've yet to resurface in person, though, on AEW television. While this is seemingly done to get them back to work and mingling with the roster once again, the timing could indicate that this was part of shooting footage for the reality show. This wouldn't be the company's first foray into reality television, of course. Roads to the Top showcased the behind-the-scenes lives of Cody and Brandy Rhodes and had been lined up for a second series prior to them leaving All Elite Wrestling earlier this year. Cryptic vignettes have begun airing of Omega and the Jacksons for several weeks now, with a match at Full Gear looking more and more likely the closer we get to the event, presumably against Death Triangle for the AEW World Trios Championships. Of course, the bouts they never technically lost. The most recent of these videos packages had significant hints to the Elite showing up at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey on November 19, which is just 8 days away. It's next Saturday, of course. Full Gear will be in New Jersey, and seemingly so will the Elite. And I know what you're probably thinking, well, and if they're backstage, and if in recent weeks they've been filming a reality show, is the elephant in the room going to be addressed? And I don't have a good answer, honestly, for you. I think that the thing is, and I'm not an expert on reality shows, I do my very best to avoid them, they're not my thing. But from what I've heard, and from when you hear interviews or you listen to podcasts or you hear enough people that have worked on reality shows, participated in them, produced them, directed them, written them. Yes, there are writers on reality shows. Is that the biggest? You think pro wrestling's a work? If you think pro wrestling's a work, look at reality shows. It's almost criminal they can be called reality because there's nothing real about them. Everything in reality shows is scripted to the point of, Total Divas, Total Bellas, whatever you want to call it. All of that was completely scripted. That basically the talent's told this is what's going to happen, react. And I wouldn't be surprised, in all honesty, considering their return to the company. You could argue it's coincidental, but I would think at the very least, the situation, maybe they don't get into the finer details about what happened at All Out and the suspension and their return to the company and that kind of stuff, but they could certainly suggest that it's a return. They're returning for the first time since September, since All Out, when they were stripped of the AEW World Trios Championships. They don't have to explicitly say what went on. You can tell the story of them returning and mingling backstage and seeing their co-workers once again without really getting into the nitty-gritty as to why. And then you could argue, well, you're going to get those people then that'll be like, see, I told you it was all a work. It was all a work. CM Punk, he was just injured, so they came up with something on the spot and then they did this. And no, it's not a work. But as is everything with pro wrestling, when you've got something that big and you're doing a reality show, you kind of have to tap into reality, don't you, there? And I think that might be the case. I think it might be AEW tapping into reality somewhat, telling the story not only on television, in terms of the product, week-to-week product, telling that story of the Elite coming back to AEW TV, but also telling the story behind the scenes of the Elite coming back to AEW as well. That's quite an interesting dichotomy that they could do there. So I think they're going to do that, and again, it's going to be very interesting. Of course, we still don't have an official announcement that the Elite are going to be at the Prudential Center, are going to be wrestling at Full Gear. Basically, we have to get an announcement either tonight on Rampage. It was taped, but that doesn't mean we can't get an announcement on the show. It's a possibility. Or we get the announcement Wednesday. It's the go-home show. Otherwise, I get they could show up at Full Gear, but certainly won't wrestle a match. I don't know what they'll do. So certainly the clock is running out. Speaking of the Elite, though, as I mentioned earlier on, their arch nemesis CM Punk has made his first public appearance since All Out, since the investigation has been complete, and since the reports and rumors that AEW and Punk are actively negotiating a buyout of his All Elite Wrestling contract. CM Punk was back in the public eye Thursday night, appearing as a color commentator for Cage Fury Fighting Championships event. CFFC's Twitter account shared and retweeted several photos of Punk at the commentary desk, not to mention video clips of the veteran wrestler calling the action for CFFC 114 show airing on UFC Fight Pass. This is a gig he's had for years, by the way. According to fans on social media, Punk was not asked by his broadcast colleague John Morgan about his recent triceps injury or the timeline of his return to the squared circle. The topic of Punk's reported AEW suspension was not broached either, again, most likely because of legal issues and legal purposes. Punk made his CFFC commentary debut at the CFFC 71 event on December 14, 2018. As I mentioned, he's had this gig for a really long time. He would subsequently call the action for nearly all CFFC, it's always going to be difficult to say shows, but his appearances for the MMA promotion reduced once he had signed with AEW in August of 2021. Prior to Thursday's show, Punk last appeared for the promotion at CFFC 110 on July 10, 2022. It's likely he missed the subsequent events in late July and August while rehabbing from the foot injury he suffered over the summer. According to several reports, Punk and AEW are currently negotiating the aforementioned contract buyout, which would bring an end to the veteran wrestler's short-lived stint with the promotion. While the Elite, the other party involved in the reported melee and brawler All Out, are expected to return to AEW TV imminently, there's growing uncertainty over Punk wrestling for AEW ever again. His future with the promotion has grown murkier since AEW fired Ace Steel, Punk's close friend and confidant, and of course they recently brought back Colt Cabana for an edition of Dynamite for a match against Ring of Honor World Champion Chris Jericho. However, it has subsequently been reported that that was a one-off to boost morale and wasn't a shot at Punk, but how can it not be a shot at CM Punk given the history, given the first person that CM Punk was talking about in the infamous All Out post-media show press conference was Scott Colton, Colt Cabana himself. A lot of people made a big deal out of this last night. As I mentioned, it's a role he's had for a really long time. He's had it since 2018. So we know CM Punk's got a passion for MMA. We know he's not particularly good at MMA, if you want to look at his fights in the UFC, but he's got a passion for it, certainly. And CM Punk's a really good broadcaster. And that's just one of the strings to his bow, isn't it? Whether it's in WWE or AEW, when he was ever on commentary, he always did great on commentary. He's always really entertaining on commentary. And a lot of people commented on this last night, and it's true that he looks great. He really, it's amazing what pro wrestling will do to CM Punk. He loves pro wrestling. Maybe pro wrestling doesn't love him back, or maybe it just doesn't agree with him. Maybe it just brings out the worst in the guy. I don't know, because you look at him there, he looks like 5 years younger than when we last saw him. When we've seen CM Punk over the last this is what I find really interesting, because you look at CM Punk when he made his AEW debut. He looked young, he looked vibrant on the stage. Like 6 months later, 9 months later, or even All Out in the summer, he just looked run down, really run down. And he mentioned he was tired and all this kind of stuff. And maybe he was, I don't know. Again, maybe pro wrestling just doesn't agree with him, which is a shame, because as far as CM Punk, the professional wrestling character and the worker, the in-ring matches, the promos, they still are great. You cannot deny that CM Punk's run, if it is just that year run in AEW, I think was enjoyable. I really do. And it is a shame that it's ended the way it's ended, because I still enjoyed the CM Punk matches. I enjoyed the CM Punk promos. I enjoyed the CM Punk segments. They were all good. They were all enjoyable. And again, it's a shame it's ended the way it has, but on the flip side, we don't see what goes on backstage, and there are two sides to every story, sometimes even more than that, if the more people that are involved. So, look, he was never going to reference the AEW incident. He was never going to reference the triceps injury and surgery. So it's just one of these things that gets people talking, certainly. Bandido is on his way to AEW. Seemingly, he is all elite. Bandido made a big life decision in signing with AEW over WWE, according to a new report. On Friday, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter confirmed that the 27-year-old luchador signed a 3-year contract with the Tony Khan-helmed promotion, and that his family back in Mexico was a big reason for this decision. PW Insider first reported that Bandido signed with AEW late last month. Meltzer confirmed the Mexican star's contract includes a maximum number of dates, but stressed that Bandido agreed to appear in more matches per year than most wrestlers on AEW's roster currently work. Quote, in the end, Bandido realized he couldn't sign with WWE because he's got a child in Mexico and his significant other does not want to move from Mexico, Meltzer explained. Bandido also would have likely had to spend some time in the WWE NXT developmental territory based around in Florida before he would be moved to the main roster, according to Meltzer's report. He would have been on the road far more often than AEW's current touring schedule as well. The fourth-generation wrestler was one of the top free agents available this year. AEW appeared to roll out the red carpet to the former ROH World Champion when he appeared on the show as an independent star in late September. He main evented Dynamite in a well-received match against Chris Jericho. Khan then reportedly offered the luchador a full-time contract moments after the main event match ended, while WWE also picked up interest in signing him full-time, but ultimately he has decided to sign with AEW primarily because of those family reasons. And look, that is a thing that AEW still has over WWE, certainly, and I know it seems somewhat contradictory because at the same time they've just hired Jeff Jarrett to flesh out what the live event situation is going to look like in AEW. A lot of people on the AEW roster want to work more shows, but a lot of people don't. And the people that don't are the people that are the top stars and don't really care. No, they don't care to work, but their dates are what they are. And I'm sure there will be other people in the AEW roster that do want to work 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, maybe even more than that. So that's something they have to figure out. But if you've got a contract that's got a certain amount of dates, it doesn't matter if they add live events or not. You're probably not working them. You're working only TVs because I'm only contracted to certain dates. So good for Bandido. Talk about a guy that really, got things going for him. Of course, I mentioned he was a top free agent, former Ring of Honor World Champion, but certainly has that match, a main event match on Dynamite in a headline spot against Chris Jericho, puts in a great showing, and suddenly he's got the biggest promotions in the world chasing him, which is fantastic for him. Ultimately, as I mentioned, he decided to sign with AEW primarily for family reasons, not having to spend too much time on the road, still getting good money. I'm sure it's probably one of, if not the biggest contract he's ever got in his career. In addition to that, as I mentioned, he doesn't have to be on the road 4 or 5 nights a week. He doesn't have to completely move and relocate his family to Florida, which still a lot of wrestlers have to do when they work for WWE, especially going through that NXT system. So I guess it was somewhat of a no-brainer. So Bandido is now all elite. Let's talk about the ratings for Dynamite on Wednesday. And AEW is really falling into this pattern here where their viewership base is what it is. It really is the case. Now, Dynamite ratings actually nearly mirrored NXT when it came to percentages this week. WrestleNomics shared the viewership information for Tuesday, and the November 9 episode of Dynamite, Wednesday, was watched by an average of 930,000 viewers overall, which is a 1% increase from the week before. This week's NXT actually happened to be down 1%, so essentially flat audience. The key demographic is where the two programs draw great similarities. Dynamite was watched by an average of 417,000 viewers aged 18 to 49 for a 0.32 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. Well, of course, that's considerably higher than NXT's demographic this week. Both programs are up 11% from the week prior. From a ranking perspective, Dynamite came in 6th in the key demographic for cable originals, according to Showbuzz Daily, and the program placed 16 in broadcast primetime. You had the CMA Awards on ABC, which did a strong number as well. You had Dynamite being outranked by 2 NBA games, and you had 3 Fox News programs covering the aftermath of the US midterms elections. So there was a lot of competition going on. But what we have really seen at this point, when it comes to Dynamite, they've kind of fallen into that TNA territory. 2000, to be honest, just 2007 to 2012, 13, maybe. And by the way, TNA Impact back in the day was doing considerably more viewers. They were doing 2 million every single week, sometimes a little bit more than that. And that's what SmackDown does nowadays. It just goes to show how television has changed dramatically in about 15 years or so. But my point is with that is TNA back in the day had its audience, and they struggled to get more. They didn't really, very rarely get much less unless there was this really strong competition on at the time, but they had to. It was always about 2 million every single week, give or take a little bit less. So it might be 1.9, it might be 2.1, it might be 2.2, it might be 1.8, but it was around that point. And that's really where Dynamite is now, realistically. For 930,000 viewers. Okay, last week it was just a little bit less than that. And they're constantly around 1 million. And they're hovering on the lower side now because it's hovering closer to 900,000 than it is to 1 million. But that's really where AEW is at this point. And I think that's reflective of the product, honestly. I watched Dynamite this week again, and not a terrible show, but realistically, they're coming into full gear pretty much ice cold, to be honest. Let's be honest. The main event match, MJF versus Moxley, is there really any steam on it? There's this bit going on with the firm, but you're really feeling the effects, I think, of what happened coming out of All Out. Because let's face it, there's a bit of a completely different situation. You'd have had a CM Punk MJF feud with great promos. That would have been fantastic. You would have had the Elite having fantastic trios matches every single week. It would have been completely different. You'd have had way more star power on the show, and it's just a show, as I mentioned, that feels cold. We're still, at this point, getting the Blackpool Combat Club versus Jericho Appreciation Society. Stuff's been stretched out way past its due date, and again, it's just cold. And I feel like the ratings kind of reflect that. Of the audience that's theirs right now is always going to be there every single week. But that sort of extra 500,000 that you could get if the product's hot, they're saying, nah, I don't need to watch the show. Saraya, of course, has been cleared, and she's given some new details on her process to be cleared, what her doctor said to her during her process of getting cleared. She was on an episode of The Sessions with Renee Paquette, and she shared a piece of advice given by her doctor, the doctor who cleared her for her return to action. She said, quote, he was like, if you ever feel like you're not feeling too well, take some time off. You know your body, Saraya said. He was like, but I will clear you to get back in the ring again. And I was just like, all right, well, how many matches can I have? And he was like, let's take it easy. We'll do 1 match a month here and there, and start gradually building up. She revealed that she was fully cleared on Halloween less than 2 weeks ago. Prior to that, she had been cleared for certain in-ring action, but the most recent appointment confirmed that she is ready to take bumps and participate in full matches. The AEW star noted the doctor who cleared her is known for working with professional athletes, and she specifically sought him out because she trusted his perspective on her condition. Of course, she's going to be facing Britt Baker at Full Gear. And she also spoke about her goals for her AEW run. She said, quote, at first it's more of a comeback story, an official comeback, and being in a different mindset of what I felt like should have been done the first time I came back. There are plenty of women that I want to have matches with eventually. I do want to do the stipulation matches that I didn't get to do in WWE that the girls get to do now. Also working more character work, try and build. I'm not going to completely let go of Paige, but a more elevated version of her. There are so many things we can do now. We have such creative freedom. I have to rebuild a character, and I'm not 100% sure what she's going to do and where she's going. I know the idea she wants, but in WWE, I knew my character. I knew Paige. I had been doing her for years, getting people writing scripts. You can switch and change whatever. Now, who is Saraya? I have to start from the beginning again, and at 30, it's effing wild. Now, when it comes to Saraya, I still butcher the pronunciation. I'm sorry, Saraya. I've seen some weird reaction to her being cleared online, and I think it goes back to this bizarre AEW versus WWE tribalism of, Well, AEW, WWE didn't clear her. That's my concern. That is factually inaccurate. WWE never even, in the old regime, broached the conversation about clearing her. She never had an MRI. She never had an X-ray. She was retired and that was it. It was never broached. And when she was deciding whether she wanted to sign with WWE or AEW, remember, she was released. She wasn't under contract with WWE. She was released by Vince McMahon, the Vince McMahon regime. And basically, the decision was, do I want to go to WWE? Triple H made the call personally to her and said, we'll bring you back. We'll look into clearing you. We'll send you for x-rays. We'll send you for MRIs. We now know that she would have been cleared to wrestle in WWE, or she could have gone, I'll go to AEW. I'll do something different. The schedule is less intense and I can still do my outside projects I might not be able to do in WWE. And she decided to go in that direction. And people, again, at the same time, when Edge comes back from a neck injury, they rejoice. When Daniel Bryan comes back from concussions, etc., they rejoice. When anyone comes back out of retirement, they rejoice. But when it's Saraya in a different company, well, that's wrong. She's not allowed to do that. Oh, what a risk. It's always a risk. Park your tribalism for a second and be happy. Be happy that someone whose dream got taken away from her is allowed to do what she loves to do again. Forget this pro wrestling tribalism bullshit about AEW versus WWE, or AEW, they run a sloppy shop, or WWE, it's the big leagues, or this, that, and the other. Park it for a second, please. And just be happy. Someone else gets to be happy. Doesn't that make you feel happy? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's the issue at hand here, right? Is that these people are so unhappy and sad, they see someone that's happy and doing their dream and they have to be bitter about it. Oh, I can't have people being happy. I've got to have them be as miserable as I am. And it's just bizarre. It's really, really bizarre. And I don't get it. I really don't get it. Let's talk about MJF ahead of Full Gear. Of course, he's challenging for the AEW World Championship at Full Gear. And according to Fightful, he, of course, did this promo this week on Dynamite. It was in a podcast studio. He wasn't actually there. According to Fightful, the aforementioned promo he did was actually filmed on Tuesday. And it only took MJF one take to complete because he's a professional. The Salt of the Earth was reportedly not physically at Dynamite this week, though the reason for said absence hasn't been provided. It would make a lot of sense that he's probably filming. That's probably why he's playing Lance Von Erich in the Iron Claw. The film stars the likes of Zac Efron, etc. So I would suggest and probably guess, this hasn't been confirmed, but the reason he wasn't at Dynamite this week because he's probably on set. Finally, a match was set to take place on Rampage tonight, but it's not happening. AEW has announced a big match postponed for Rampage has been postponed due to an injury. The first match in the AEW World Championship Eliminator Tournament took place on this week's edition of Dynamite. Ethan Page defeated Eddie Kingston by pinfall to advance to the semi-finals. The other first three-round matches, pitting Bandido against Roosh, Brian Cage and Dante Martin and Ricky Starks against Lance Archer, were all set for tonight's Rampage show. However, AEW shot an angle on Dynamite that saw Archer attack Starks backstage, with his status for the show being put into question. AEW announced on Twitter today that Starks had not medically been cleared for the bout, meaning the match had been postponed until next week. So I don't know if that was always the plan. You kind of feel like it probably was. There was a lot of matches for Rampage this evening. Or maybe we know that Ricky Starks has kind of been absent for a while recently. It hasn't been due to injury by all accounts, but maybe they just wanted to play it safe by an extra week. We don't know, but we're going to get it next week instead. So there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.